A U.S. park ranger steps out of his truck for less than 2 minutes. The doors are locked. The engine is cold. His boots stop mid-stride, and then nothing. No screams. No struggle. No body. What investigators later discovered inside the truck turned this case from a missing person report into one of the most unsettling mysteries ever tied to America's wilderness. If you think people don't just vanish in plain sight, stay with me until the end. Subscribe now, because this story only gets darker. On the morning of September 14, 2011, Ethan Calloway did everything by the book. Ethan was a 37-year-old U.S. Forest Service ranger assigned to Coconino National Forest, Arizona, a vast landscape of red rock canyons, pine forests, and volcanic plateaus stretching for nearly 2 million acres. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't new. Colleagues described him as quiet, methodical, and almost obsessive about procedure. That morning, Ethan logged a routine solo patrol near a restricted backcountry zone outside Munns Park, an area closed to the public due to repeated reports of strange vandalism and unauthorized fires. Nothing violent. Nothing urgent. Just another box to check. At 8:42 a.m., Ethan radioed dispatch to confirm his location. His voice was calm. Normal. He mentioned nothing unusual. No sounds, no sightings, no concerns. At 9:11 a.m., his government-issued pickup truck stopped transmitting GPS data. When another ranger reached the coordinates later that afternoon, the truck was exactly where Ethan had parked it, engine off, doors locked, keys still in the ignition. Ethan Calloway was gone. No blood. No signs of a struggle. And no explanation for how a trained ranger could vanish from open forest terrain in broad daylight. Investigators assumed the answer would be simple. Maybe Ethan Calloway stepped away to investigate something nearby. Maybe he slipped, fell, and wandered off injured. But the moment they examined the truck, those explanations collapsed. The pickup was locked from the inside using the electronic system. There were no broken windows. No forced entry. No damage. The seat was pushed back exactly how Ethan liked it. His radio sat on the passenger seat, switched off. His backpack, containing water, food, and emergency gear, was untouched in the rear. Most unsettling of all, his service sidearm was still holstered inside the vehicle. Search teams fanned out from the truck in widening circles. Within minutes, they found Ethan's boot prints in the reddish dirt beside the driver's door. The tread matched his issued boots perfectly. The prints led away from the truck for roughly 40 feet. Then the ground changed, from dirt to exposed volcanic rock. And the tracks simply stopped. No scuff marks. No continuation. No sign he'd climbed, slipped, or been dragged. Search dogs were brought in that evening. They picked up Ethan's scent at the driver's door, then lost it at the same stretch of bare rock where the footprints vanished. It was as if Ethan Calloway had walked out of his truck and never touched the ground again. By sunrise the next morning, the situation had escalated. More than 80 people were now involved in the search for Ethan Calloway. Forest rangers, county deputies, volunteer trackers, and 2 helicopter crews. This wasn't a casual disappearance anymore. A trained ranger had vanished under circumstances that made no sense. The helicopters scanned from above using thermal imaging. Ravines, tree lines, and open clearings lit up in infrared. Deer appeared. Coyotes appeared. Even buried animal dens showed faint heat signatures. But there was no sign of a human body. On the ground, trackers moved methodically, checking every wash, canyon edge, and game trail within a 5-mile radius. They expected to find something: scraps of clothing, a dropped tool, a broken branch. They found nothing. Not even disturbed soil beyond the original 40-foot path. By late afternoon, searchers began exchanging uneasy glances. This terrain didn't swallow people whole. If Ethan had fallen, they would find him. If an animal had attacked him, there would be blood, drag marks, or tracks. Instead, the forest looked untouched, as if Ethan had never existed there at all. That evening, Command quietly expanded the search parameters. And one ranger filed a note that would later change how this case was understood forever. The note was easy to miss. Filed near the bottom of the daily incident log, Ranger Lucas Moreno wrote that he had heard a brief radio transmission while standing near Ethan's truck, one that hadn't come from dispatch or any active search team. At 6:18 p.m., as dusk settled over the forest, Moreno's radio crackled to life. At first, it was only static. Then, through the interference, came a voice. Male. Low. Strained. Can't see. Moreno froze and immediately called for dispatch to confirm if anyone was transmitting on Ethan Calloway's frequency. Dispatch replied instantly, negative. No open channels. No outgoing signals. The transmission lasted less than 2 seconds before cutting out. When technicians later examined Ethan's radio, they found something disturbing. The battery was nearly full, but the device itself was switched off when recovered from the truck. There was no logical way it could have transmitted. Even stranger, the signal hadn't originated from the truck. Radio logs placed its source half a mile northeast, deep inside a section of forest already searched twice. Teams swept the area through the night. They found no footprints, no equipment, no Ethan. Only silence, thick, heavy, and watching. On the third day, investigators noticed something no one wanted to explain. Ethan Calloway's last confirmed radio check-in was at 8:42 a.m. His GPS signal cut out at 9:11 a.m. But satellite data from a nearby fire lookout showed movement near Ethan's truck at 9:47 a.m., 36 minutes after he should have been gone. The footage was grainy and distant. Trees blurred the view. But analysts could make out a human figure standing beside the truck. It didn't move like Ethan. The figure stood completely still for nearly a full minute. Then it turned. Not walked. Not ran. Turned in place. And stepped into the tree line. No one could identify the clothing. The posture was wrong. Too stiff, too deliberate. The timestamp matched no ranger activity, and no one else was scheduled anywhere near that zone. When the video was enhanced, a final detail sent chills through the room. The figure never casts a shadow. Not once. Investigators quietly pulled the footage from official reports. The public would never see it. But among the rangers, a question spread fast and quietly. If that wasn't Ethan Calloway, what was standing next to his truck after he vanished? By the fourth day, the search had become quieter. Not because hope was gone, but because the rangers were starting to notice patterns they didn't want to acknowledge. Ethan Calloway wasn't the first ranger to disappear in this forest. He was just the most recent. A senior supervisor quietly pulled old incident reports. Over the past 23 years, 4 other solo patrols had ended the same way: abandoned vehicles, missing personnel, and no physical remains. Different districts. Different years. Same outcome. In every case, the ranger vanished within an hour of their last routine check-in. In every case, footprints stopped abruptly on hard ground. And in 2 of those cases, radio technicians had logged brief, unexplained transmissions after the ranger was already presumed missing. One retired ranger broke the silence during a late-night briefing. "The forest doesn't take people," he said. "It replaces them." No one laughed. That night, several searchers reported hearing footsteps circling the command trailer long after everyone had gone to sleep. When lights were turned on, nothing was there. No tracks. No animals. Just the feeling of being watched. By morning, Command made a decision. All solo patrols in Coconino National Forest were suspended indefinitely. The call came 9 days after Ethan disappeared. At 2:14 a.m., long after the official search had been scaled back, dispatch received a transmission on an inactive ranger frequency, Ethan Calloway's ID. The voice was clear. Too clear. Unit 12 checking in. Patrol complete. The dispatcher froze. That call sign had been retired the day Ethan vanished. When she asked for location confirmation, there was a pause, 3 full seconds of silence. Then Ethan's voice replied again. "I'm where I'm supposed to be." Supervisors were notified immediately. Radio engineers traced the signal in real time. It wasn't bouncing off towers. It wasn't spoofed. It was coming from inside the forest. A mobile unit followed the signal to a shallow ravine less than a mile from where Ethan's truck had been found, an area already searched multiple times. There, lying neatly on a flat stone, was Ethan's body camera. The device powered on when picked up. The final recording showed Ethan standing alone, staring into the trees. Something off-camera spoke his name, and Ethan answered, "I'm coming." The footage ended there. What finally broke the case wasn't technology. It was a mistake. A week after the body camera was recovered, a federal analyst noticed something wrong with the audio. The voice calling Ethan's name didn't echo like it should have in open forest. It sounded contained, close, as if spoken from behind a solid barrier. Investigators returned to the ravine with ground-penetrating radar. Beneath the volcanic rock was an old Cold War-era access tunnel, undocumented on modern maps. Inside, they found signs of long-term habitation, generators, food stores, notebooks, and stolen ranger equipment dating back decades. And one man. His name was Caleb Rourke. Former military. Declared dead in 1994 after a training accident. He had survived underground, moving through forgotten tunnels, studying ranger patrols, copying voices from intercepted radio traffic. Caleb admitted to something chilling. He didn't kill Ethan. He lured him. The voices. The footsteps. The transmissions. "They follow procedure," Caleb said calmly. "That's all I needed." Ethan had stepped underground willingly, believing he was responding to a fellow ranger in distress. He never came back up. Caleb Rourke's arrest should have ended the nightmare. It didn't. As investigators mapped the tunnel system, they realized how he had remained invisible for nearly 3 decades. The forest didn't just conceal him, it protected him. The tunnels surfaced in places no satellite could see. Hard rock erased footprints. Tree cover swallowed sound. Rourke hadn't needed help from the wilderness. He had learned to use it. Inside the tunnels, agents recovered personal items belonging to 4 missing rangers, badges, radios, body cameras. None of the remains were ever found. Rourke refused to say what happened to them, only repeating one sentence during interrogation. "They always came on their own." Psychologists later concluded that Rourke wasn't driven by rage or survival, but control. He chose rangers because they were trained to respond, conditioned to help, and unlikely to break protocol. Ethan Calloway fit perfectly. When news broke, the Forest Service quietly sealed multiple tunnel entrances and classified large portions of the findings. The official report blamed environmental hazards and criminal exploitation of undeclared infrastructure. The public moved on. But among rangers, a darker truth lingered. Ethan hadn't disappeared because the forest was dangerous. He disappeared because someone understood it better than anyone else ever had. Caleb Rourke was sentenced to life in federal prison without parole. Officially, the case of Ethan Calloway was closed. But some things refused to stay buried. Months after the trial, a routine systems audit flagged an anomaly. An inactive ranger frequency briefly activated at 2:17 a.m. The transmission lasted less than a second. No voice. Just open air. Engineers blamed residual interference. Then it happened again. Same time. Same frequency. When the signal was traced, it originated from inside Coconino National Forest, near a tunnel entrance that had already been sealed. A ranger supervisor quietly ordered the frequency permanently shut down. Radios were reprogrammed. Logs were wiped. No one wanted to ask how a sealed tunnel could still broadcast anything at all. Today, solo patrols are no longer permitted in several U.S. national forests. Rangers are trained to ignore unidentified transmissions, no matter how familiar the voice sounds. And in Coconino, there's an unspoken rule passed between veterans and rookies alike. If you hear your name on the radio, and you didn't give it first, don't answer. Stories like Ethan Calloway's don't end when the video does. They end when we stop paying attention. Somewhere out there are still places on the map that look empty, but aren't. And people who vanished because they trusted the wrong voice at the wrong moment. So here's my question to you. If you were a ranger, and you heard your own name come through the radio, would you answer? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story unsettled you, that's not an accident. There are more cases like this on this channel, stories the official reports barely explain, and some they never closed at all. Subscribe now, turn on notifications, and start with the next video on your screen. Because once you notice the pattern, you can't unsee it.